Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjumant Synergy coming to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we are actually going to be taking a look at a budget deck. Now, this budget deck is Simic, and with this deck we have a lot of cool things going on for us here. So we have Undying and being able to take away +1/+1 counters off of the Undying creatures with Zameck Guildmage. We have Evolve. We're able to evolve our creatures to make them bigger. We also have some counter magic. We have ways to keep our creatures around. So ultimately, it's a really, really fun deck to play, and it is super cheap. It's incredibly cheap to actually put this deck together. And if you guys have more expensive cards, you're always more than welcome to add them in. So the first thing that we are taking a look at here is the land base of the deck. So we're running 22 lands, and just instantly the easiest way to make this land base better would be to add in hinterland harbors and breeding pools. So that's just a surefire way of making things more consistent, providing more mana for us that's appropriate, and ultimately the deck just gets better. But as a standard here for the budget build, we have a playset of the Simic Guildgate. So that's going to be providing green or blue for us. From there, we have our basics. So we're actually running 14 basic forests. So I'll break them off into sections here. So 4, 8, 12, and 14. And then we have 4 islands. So ultimately, we have 8 sources of blue for us, which is pretty on par. We don't have a huge amount of blue cards, but at the same time, adding in dual lands would definitely make this a lot better. So we have that. And now let's take a look at the deck here and what all creatures and spells we have inside. So the first thing that we're taking a look at is the creatures in ascending order, starting off with Experiment 1, which is a 1/1 for 1 green with Evolve. And we can remove 2 +1/+1 counters off of him and regenerate him. So Experiment 1 is really strong in this deck just because he survives removal pretty easily if he's already had +1/+1 counters placed on him. So we can just essentially make him smaller to help him survive any type of wrath abilities or removal, which is really nice. And he assures you that you're going to have like that one creature, even post-wrath, that is still going to be able to get bigger if you have more creatures in your hand. Then we have Cloudfin Raptor, so it's a 0/1 for 1 blue with flying and evolve. So it's an evasion creature and it can get pretty big pretty quick. So being able to swing in with evasion damage is always nice. And our opponent may not have ways of blocking flying, so it ends up working towards our advantage here. So play set of Cloudfin Raptor. We have Young Wolf in the deck, so he is a 3-of in the deck. He's not the most amazing Undying creature, but at the same time, he works pretty well for us in this deck. So he's a 1/1 for 1 green with Undying, so whenever he dies, he's going to come back with a +1/+1 counter on him if he didn't already have a +1/+1 counter on him. If he did, he won't be coming back, but just initially, Young Wolf is pretty good because you can play him early on, and then off of Zameck Guildmage, you end up being able to just keep your Undying creatures around for a little while longer. We're also running Strangleroot Geist in here, so probably my favorite Undying creature out of like all of them that are out there. So it's a 2/1 for double green, haste and Undying. So we're running a playset of him here. So the haste lets him be really aggressive, and the Undying is going to work pretty well because even when Undying happens and we have like evolved creatures out there, he's coming back as a 3/2, so he could potentially help our other creatures be able to evolve yet again. From there we have Zameck Guildmage, so 2/2 for 1 green and 1 blue, and he has 2 abilities for 1 green and 1 blue. The first one is each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And the second one is remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control and draw a card. So we have a playset of him here, and I think the most important thing about the Guildmage is just being able to remove +1/+1 counters, keep Undying creatures around, and be able to draw more. Being able to draw is really important in any deck, and with this deck, because it gives us such a good synergy with Undying, it's even better. So it's always nice to have that going on for us. The next thing that we have here is Predator Ooze, so it's a 1/1 for 3. It's triple green, which is a little bit intensive, but if you guys have the appropriate things in the mana base should work fine as it is for running stuff like Predator Ooze, but if you have the dual lands, it definitely makes it a whole lot more consistent. But Predator Ooze, triple green, indestructible 1/1. Whenever he attacks, he gets a +1/+1 counter, and whenever a creature dealt damage by him dies this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him as well. So Predator Ooze ends up being really, really strong in this deck just because he ends up being really big really easily. Now, while he doesn't play off of the evolve for our creatures, he still is a enormous creature in that removal doesn't get rid of him, and he just gets even more progressively big each and every single turn. Then we have our last creature here, which is Deadbridge Goliath, which is a 5/5 for 4, double green and 2 generic, and it has a scavenge for 6. The scavenge isn't really as relevant, however, having a 5/5 for 4 body is really relevant in this deck just because of all the evolve that we have going on. Well, at least we have 8 creatures here that have evolved, so it's a really, really good chance that Deadbridge Goliath is going to be able to evolve those creatures. So just having a 5/5 on the field is really strong, but being able to play off of other creatures getting a little bit bigger is really nice as well. So we have a play set of Deadbridge. From there, we have Simic Charm, so we're moving into the non-creature things. Simic Charm is 1 green and 1 blue, and we can give a creature we control +3/+3 until the end of the turn, or permanents we control gain hexproof until the end of the turn, or return target creature to its owner's hand. So all 3 of these modes are perfectly playable and usable in this deck. So it just depends on the situation and what is the most appropriate thing that you can do, but ultimately Simic Charm lets us protect our creatures, either make them bigger or start taking our opponent's creatures and forcing them to put them back into their hands. So Simic Charm ends up being really strong in this deck, and I really like it. It's one of my favorite charms, aside from like Orzhov Charm. I think Orzhov Charm is probably my favorite one, but Simic Charm is definitely like one of my favorites. From there we have Spell Rupture, so it's a instant speed counter spell for 2 mana, 1 generic and 1 blue. So counter target spell unless its controller pays X, where X is the greatest power amongst creatures we control. So with Spell Rupture, it's going to provide a easy way to counter our opponent's things, and it doesn't have a bias. It doesn't say like counter target creature or counter target non-creature or something like that. But ultimately, we're just going to have a creature out there, and if it's a bigger one, we end up having a definite way of just being able to counter things. So I love Spell Rupture in here, and we also have more counter spells in the sideboard, but just in the main board, not a lot of people will expect to see Spell Rupture, and it ends up just being really, really perfect. And then the last card that we have here is Rapid Hybridization. So we destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated, and that creature's controller puts a 3/3 onto the battlefield. So the hybridization can be used on our opponent's creatures if they have like something that's really, really huge and we couldn't deal with it otherwise. But it also lets us play off of our own things. Off of Undying and Zameck Guildmage, we can use hybridization on an Undying creature. The creature comes back, and we can use Zameck Guildmage to remove that +1/+1 counter and draw a card. So essentially, for like 3 mana, we can make a 3/3, and we can also draw a card going off of that Undying, Guildmage, and hybridization interaction. Also, Rapid Hybridization can be targeted on Predator Ooze, and Predator Ooze will essentially say like, oh, well, I'm indestructible, bro. Nothing happens to me, but you still get your 3/3, which is like the best part about this. So remember that with Predator Ooze, hybridization can just give you a 3/3 for 1 blue mana. So that is the main board that we have in here. So now let's take a look at what we have included in the sideboard. So for our sideboard here, we have Yeva Nature's Herald. So I'm running 2 of her in the sideboard, and she's a 4/4 for 4 with Flash, and we can cast green creature cards as though they had Flash. So Yeva is a really nice card to have in here. She is well-sized enough to the point where whenever she's actually entering the battlefield, the evolve is going to be pretty useful. So if our opponent's trying to like swing with their creatures and we have our evolved creatures that would otherwise like trade with them, we can block, then have Yeva come in and trigger off evolve, and we may be able to kill one of our opponent's creatures or multiple if depending on how we're blocking and how many creatures we're blocking with. But she triggers off Evolve pretty well, but the biggest thing that I like about her is just letting us play the rest of our things at an instant speed because they have Flash. So if we want to play like Deadbridge Goliath the next turn and use Evolve yet again, we can play off of that. If we want to play like Strangleroot Geist or something at the end of our opponent's turn because we're not sure what they could do in a given turn, we can do that as well. And then we just kind of like give ourselves an out to being able to keep mana open for stuff like Spell Rupture, or if our opponent doesn't play anything, we can just go into another creature and stuff like that. So I really like Yeva in this deck. She is really, really nice, and I think just the biggest thing is giving you options. Giving you options to either play creatures during your opponent's turn, or keep mana open for charms, or spell ruptures, or, well, I don't know, maybe even hybridization. So Yeva's in here. We also have Naturalize, so for 2 mana, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and we have 2 of them. So just being able to deal with anything that could be a nuisance for us. From there, we have Silklash Spider. So Silklash Spider is a really solid card to have in here up against anything that is flying. So it has a reach, and it's a 2/7 for 5. And for X amount of mana and double green, it deals X damage to each creature with flying. So Silklash Spider ends up being really strong up against decks that are running like a lot of Lingering Soul copies, where they're able to just make a bunch of 2/2s, and they can swing and make like Sorin emblems and just swing with a lot of dudes really easily. Silklash Spider lets us deal with that. Then we have Negate, so we're running 2 Negate in the sideboard, counter target non-creature spells, so up against the control matchups, and also like the mid-range decks that are running a lot of non-creature spells, so 2 of those. We also have Tormod's Crypt, so I'm running 2 Tormod's Crypt, where it's sacrifice it and exile all cards from target player's graveyard for 0 mana. So I love Tormod's Crypt being able to just exile everything from our opponent's grave. So 2 Tormod's Crypt. We're also running 1 Grafdigger's Cage, so unfortunately the Grafdigger's Cage actually restricts our own Undying. However, it's a more reasonable way of just having a removal element for, like, well, not really removal element, but it's a really good way to just be able to deal with Reanimator decks, definitely, because not a lot of Reanimator decks are going to be running any sort of artifact hate, so up against those decks, Grafdigger's Cage, even though it restricts our own Undying, it's another way to be able to just have it on the field, and our opponent really can't have a way to deal with it, and then they can't use Unburial Rites to get anything going off. So while it does inhibit our deck just a little bit, it does a whole lot more against our opponents that are playing Unburial Rites into stuff like Angel of Glory's Rise, Angel of Serenity, even like more just kind of like typical Magic, like where they're going into like Craterhoof Behemoth. There's not like really any tricks, they're just trying to bash us down. Grafdigger's Cage does help out a ton, and it stays out there permanently, whereas Tormod's Crypt, you exile their graveyard. However, if they have the means of building it back up, and they can get more creatures in their grave, and another way to reanimate them, they can go off the combo from there. Grafdigger's Cage is a much more permanent means of dealing with Reanimator decks, and that's why I chose to have it, even though it kind of doesn't let us work off of Undying very well. So 1 Grafdigger's Cage here. We're also running Hands of Biting here, so we get to tap down target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and we get to Cipher. So with Hands of Biting, it's really strong just because we're able to tap down one of our opponent's things, and if we have something like Cloudfin Raptor where it has evasion, and our opponent doesn't have any ways to block anything that's flying, we can use the Cipher on the Cloudfin Raptor, swing with the Cloudfin Raptor, and get another copy of Hands of Biting and tap down potentially another creature and not let them untap. So for like the first turn that you play it, and when you initially play it, Hands of Biting can tap down 2 things potentially, but ultimately it's going to be letting us tap down 1 creature each turn from that point forward. So Hands of Biting is an easy way to keep something like a Hell Rider. Hell Rider is pretty annoying, and with all of the triggers that he could potentially make, we want to keep him tapped. So 2 Hands of Biting is pretty appropriate for us. And then we have 3 Aetherize. So with Aetherize, return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand for 4 mana at an instant speed. So up against decks that are running a lot of creatures and they are consistently using those creatures to just swing in on us, Aetherize ends up being really, really awesome just because they swing with all of their dudes. They may even get like a Hell Rider trigger or 2 or like 5. And then we just drop like Aetherize. We make them return all attacking creatures to their hand, and they're kind of screwed just because they don't have all of those creatures out there anymore. So Aetherize is really nice. I really like it. The only thing in the sideboard that would be debatable is like the Grafdigger's Cage, but if you really don't want to run it, you can run another Tormod's Crypt. But ultimately, I did like the Grafdigger's Cage up against a more permanent means of dealing with Reanimator. Other things that can be added in, Master Biomancers can be added in here. You guys can switch some things around. Deadbridge Goliath isn't like really necessary. Like you can switch Biomancer for that, and Biomancer is a really cool and flavorful card to have in here. Also, Thragtusks make it pretty good as well. I mean, Thragtusk is like one of the most powerful cards in the standard format, and he lets you gain life. If he dies, you get another 3/3, and he does play off of Evolve really well on our 8 evolved creatures. So ultimately, if you guys have any more expensive cards, you're always more than welcome to add them in, change some things around. But this is budget Simic for you guys. So hopefully, if you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. And until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.